Okay, so let's take what we know about Marvelous Designer and make our curtains. Those were kind of the biggest clock item in the scene, in addition to the little pillow that I made over here, which used the techniques I demonstrated, and this pillow here. Let's make these curtains, though. These are going to be really useful for us. Now I have this nice curtain rod that is all modeled out, but I'm going to actually take something much more simple to drape my curtains on, just to make it simple for us and easy to drape in Marvelous Designer. So we'll just take a simple line. Doesn't even need to be that big. Let's just make it this big, make it render a bowl like that. It's the right size. We'll just convert to poly and then export selected as enough X. Kate, these are the settings. I'm just leaving them out, whatever my last export was. And these look like they should be fine in Marvelous Designer. Let's just import that little curtain rod. We did import SPX and we're on OK. Move it up there. Get out. What we're going to do here is just make two pieces of fabric for the loop that goes over the rod, and we're going to sew them together to create that loop. And then we're going to move them into place over here around the rod so that when we simulate, they don't fall to the ground, but they go to their place on the rod to make sure we're on the correct side of that rod move into place. Because both down. Okay, and once you get in place, it looks like our cell lines could be a little cleaner. Let's edit those. We actually want it to sound like this. And like that. Yeah, that'll do it. Now you can see that the sew lines are going above and below that rod and our panels on each side of it, assumingly, and see what happens. It basically worked except that part of it missed. So let's reset that real quick. And I think that if we move it into place a little better, it should work fine. Simulate. There we go, drop straight onto there. Now we're going to do is take another panel for curtain, make it about them big, put it in place, then we're going to do there. So get to the bottom of this panel, make sure it's in the right place. It looks right. Let's simulate and see okay. Have a nice curtain, and you can see we've fallen through a little bit up here, which we don't want, so let's undo that. Move it up a little bit. Kara did a selection on this right, clicked it, and hit solidify. Now I hit strengthen, and it almost worked. Still ripping through there. Okay, what I've done now is take these two panels up here. Selected them and turned on solidify. You can do it over here by selecting these two panels and going to solidify on. You can strengthen it more. You want K, and then when I moved them back into place and simulated, they made that kind of shape. So they don't drape as much, but they're also hanging onto that rod still. My other curtain has just fallen down to the ground. So let's select that you said 3 derangement, and then I turned off the sewing here so that this wasn't hanging on that and dragging it off of the rod. So now that it's nicely draped, we can take the curtain and attach it to that, or again like this, and then simulate K. Now that's really hanging on there, nicely trying to rip through over there, but not quite. Okay, so that's a nice curtain that's open now is when the magic happens. You might want to change that. So it's not quite dripping on the floor, and you would of course do that by moving this up. Moving that up, turn on simulate. There you go. It's not quite touching the floor. She wanted to touch the floor a little bit. Right about there. Okay, now this is where the magic of marvelous designer happens. If we take this panel here and scrunch it up, then this curtain will follow, and to scrunch that up, all we have to do is this and drag that back. Like so. Now watch this. So I have an issue with that tearing through. But you can see how the curtain nicely just folded. Okay, to fix that thing. Tearing through, I've actually had more success by just turning off solidify, but using the shrinkage weft and shrinkage numbers, I had set it 100. If I put it to 50, then it doesn't give that thing as much leeway to stretch and warp. So it was not able to tear through the curtain rod. But there we are with a nice curtain. I think you could use some more desolation on there. So what you would do for that is to turn down the particle distance. So we'll put it to about 12, and that will add more faces to our mesh here. You can change from training under miscellaneous. You can change from triangular. Oh, and I actually don't want to just change those ones. I want to change this one. So you select the panels here, and then you can adjust. So particle distance here on this one, 12 in C, that's a little nicer. Actually, let's go even lower, like 8, getting really high poly curtain here. You can change it to quad. And then what you can do, of course, is turbos, that once you get it back into 3D Max, and it look really nice, and you notice it hugs that curtain rod perfectly right now. So that's great. So you can just do this over and over and make random simulations and then layer your curtains on top of each other and make different looking curtains. I mean, you buy these things online, these curtains, for, $15 for a little collection of them. You can make all your own custom curtains in Marvelous Designer quite easily, and you could maybe even sell your own collection. There's our final result. It's a nice flowing cloth curtain. So it's as easy as that with Marvelous Designer. It makes it quite simple for us. And when we export it back in, it'll look really good. So we're going to take this finished product and we're going to export it. I have to do is file export because I turned up the mesh quite a bit. It takes a little while to process. It's going to be really not high quality. And back in 3 years, Max, you don't worry too much, depending on your computer, of course. But I'm not going to worry too much about my poly count or anything like that on export settings, of course. You can do thickness or thin, which makes it so that curtain doesn't have a thickness. I think we'll just go thin. I don't think the thickness is going to add anything for us. If you don't see that close out, you can thickness, and then you could go in and add some seams and maybe some sew lines, things like that. If you really wanted to get detail, well, just go thin on this one. And we can put a show on it in 3 years, max, if we really wanted to it. And then import. See, we get here sitting right there on our rod. Okay, perfect. It's not tall enough, so we should have measured this out properly before we did it. But you get the point. That's how these curtains were made, and that's how you can make your own curtains. And I said it is actually quite good. I think you could use another turbos on this for sure. See what that looks like. Yeah, that's really, really nice. Okay. And we forgot to turn these 2 quads. Obviously, they're triangles, but I mean, that's not going to matter. That will still work for you. Isolate this. Okay, now what you could do, like I was saying, is you could put a show on it if you wanted to have thickness. Let's see what else we can do with this curtain if we want to turn off the turbo smooth for a minute. Put a show on it. I think would be even better, though. Let's try the shell just to demonstrate. Okay, show. Add some thickness to it. And then you could put the turbo smooth on top of that. Now, granted, that's going to at least double your poly count, actually a lot more, because it now has these edge polys to how you want it to move on top of the shell, but all those subtle wrinkles that might be a little too much on these curtains, actually, but something you could never get by just modeling with polys. You need that cloth modifier, and that can add just that little bit of realism that really puts your image over the top. So this is great. This has thickness now, which makes it look even more realistic. And the best part, of course, is if you put in Unwrap UBW modifier on this, you'll see that it's already totally unwrapped. If you open the movie editor, we'll see our panel sitting in here. Super high poly. Okay. And I showed you before you just have to pack them, and they'll go down in a perfect little texture for you. Okay, so those panels remain flat. So you can paint textures onto them or just add a texture amount to it and it will map across it perfectly. So there you go, there's your curtain. I guess the only other thing you could do instead of the show, I wanted to try adding some edges to it manually. And of course, right after I say that we don't need to worry about poly, can we get these crazy poly counts on this thing and it's just killing us? Okay, let's get rid of our own U. You could take these edges and you could do a loop on them, seems to work, yeah, at least down to there. Then you could start here and go another loop. And another loop all the way up. I think it went all the way up. Okay, and then from there you can just do a create shape. Linear, you can put manual edges on this where the fabric has been sewn back over itself for to me to make an edge case. Now that's just surrender a spline, you can make it rectangular, like this make it real small. Right, something like that. Then you could put a turbos on that. Now it's got a nice edge on it. Right, you could make some little stitching. And you see a line tool again to go all the way around this spline to add some sewing. You can do whatever you want, but I think for our purposes that is going to work for our scene, and it's going to have this nice flowing cloth look to it, which will add a lot of realism and be very convincing.